Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to why the South is broken, and I don't really know what to expect of this because I know in a lot of videos I do, like in terms of maybe like states that have certain problems or lowest incomes and stuff, a lot of southern states seem to appear, but then also there's a lot of reactions that I do where, whether it's around culture or like food and like history and stuff, it also evolves around the South, so it's like a mixture of the two. I don't know what this is going to go into, but I know in reactions I've done before, I mean, when the South started struggling was when was it around the time of the revolution, and then they really relied on like crops and farming and stuff, I think, and then in the North relied on something else, which was a much better money making way, which is sort of, I guess, what set it apart initially. But I don't know, this might not go into the history as much, it might just go into the current day, which probably makes more sense. But we're going to check this out and see the case they're making and learning about maybe the situation. Hopefully this is a fair video, and if you're from the South, hopefully you don't find this frustrating or you agree or whatever. But let me know your thoughts on this video after I react to it, because I would be interested in hearing people who live in the South, or maybe even not in the South but you've been there or you've lived there before and stuff, and yeah, hearing your thoughts and all those kinds of things. But we're going to check this out and see what's going on.
When you think about the United States, which cities, states, or regions come first to mind? Is it California, with its unique culture, perfect weather, and world-renowned institutions like Hollywood and Silicon Valley? Or is it the massively sized state of Texas, with its red-hot economy, strong individualism, and proximity to Mexico? Maybe it's the Big Apple or even Chicago, two of America's biggest cities with its tallest skylines and biggest financial markets. For much of the world, America's most visited, populated, and economically important regions have become almost synonymous with what the United States is, and the US South isn't that. No, it's a part of the nation that's become almost forgotten, if not for the age-old myth of Southern elegance, charm, and hospitality.
I am a third-generation farmer. My family farmed the soybean and cotton. Things got a little tough, and so I had to get a second job. But is it enough? No.
Despite my lifelong fascination with maps, researching this video on why the South is broken reminded me of their greatest flaw. Maps can show us so much about how places are connected, their resources, and even much of their history. But maps lack context, as showing isn't always telling, and geographically similar areas can be worlds apart. If you look at a map of the southern United States, you can see that states like Florida and Texas seemingly fit in perfectly. And yet, when you look at the context and consider their history, you will see that these states have as much in common with places like New Mexico and California as they do Mississippi. That's why it's so difficult to define exactly what the South really even is. Vox lists all of these states, including Texas, Virginia, and Florida, as the South, while a 538 survey has responded.
Oh, even, I mean, I know it's not, but even places like Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, I guess they're not in the South, but they've got some sort of connection in a sense. I've never seen some of these states thinking they're connected, but I guess culturally in some sort of way they are. 1% of respondents considered Colorado part of the South. Damn. 89% of respondents considered Georgia part of the South. So who doesn't consider Georgia or the real southern states, part of the South? Who's not thinking that? Because it's literally in the South. And like historically and culturally, it is the South.
Respondents including places as far west as Colorado and Arizona, and Wikipedia stretches the South all the way up to Delaware and Maryland.
What?
However, the consensus, but definitely not the census, seems to describe the South as being made up of Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia.
Wait, not Arkansas. Obviously, he's explained Texas and Florida, but Arkansas? Is that not?
Traditionally speaking, the Deep South, not including places like Florida and Texas, or even Kentucky or Virginia. That's because the South,
Oh yeah, Virginia. I didn't think of Virginia or Kentucky.
according to most Americans, is this place that's as much about a period in time as it is a physical landmass. That's why you hear about the Old South and the New South, which cover roughly the same geographic area, but can be a world apart due to the progress that's happened there over the past century or so. At least that's the narrative that many Southerns would have you believe. And perhaps it's true to some extent, But the difference between the inevitability of change and the acceptance of change have always been a real problem in the American South. Now, the southern United States was already inhabited by the Mississippian people long before European settlers showed up there in the 15th century. Spain, France, and England were the first international countries to claim and settle the area we now know of as the southern United States, leaving a heavy influence on the region that can still be seen today, as with the French culture seen all over Louisiana and especially New Orleans. The southern region of the United States has, in many ways, been at the forefront of America's contentious history, from the snow campaign of the Revolutionary War in South Carolina back in 1775 to serving as the southern theater of the War of 1812 to being the epicenter of the Civil War, and that's to say nothing of slavery, the Jim Crow era, or the Civil Rights Movement, all of which deeply stained the entire region while highlighting the inherent flaws of a nation that was supposed to be built on freedom and justice. The first and second Great Migration saw a total of more than 11 million African Americans fleeing to the northern portions of the United States due to the harsh, unfair, and often violent conditions they faced in the southern core. But what comes to mind when you think about the modern South? Probably the region's nature, agriculture, and unique culinary style, or its isolation and traditional values. Either way, I'm confident it isn't urban sprawl, economic opportunity, or city building, and we should really look at why that is. But first, I should mention that the South actually overlaps the fastest growing American region. See, the Sun Belt region includes at least part of every southern state. And while the sizable Sun Belt region stretches across the major cities of at least 15 different US states, all the way from Los Angeles, California to Charleston, South Carolina, it's also the most economically potent region of the United States and the primary relocation target of American workers, families, and retirees. Then again, the South being located within the Sun Belt is more about the massive size of that region than an indicator of potential growth or success in the southern United States. And the South has struggled significantly for more than a century now, with lagging economics, major pollution, problematic health outcomes, and limited development. That's partially because the South lacks in urban development and the kind of infrastructure that goes along with urban growth, with the biggest cities across the entire region being Atlanta, Nashville, Charlotte, New Orleans, Memphis, and Raleigh, none of which has a city proper population of even 1 million residents. Atlanta, Nashville, and Charlotte do at least have thriving economies and growing populations. Well, it's a little more than just that. If the South were just those 3 cities and their corresponding metropolitan areas, then the South would be one of the fastest growing and most economically successful portions of America, with endless development and the ability to draw some of the nation's most prominent corporations. But then, that would make the South an entirely different place anyway, because most of the South is made up of very small communities, living on few, often low-paying manufacturing businesses, with a cost of living that only remains so low because upward mobility remains nearly impossible. I'm sure you have passed through some places like that on your way to other places, or perhaps just to get some fuel or grab a Big Mac. But whether it be Corinth, Mississippi, Jackson, Tennessee, or countless other southern cities suffering through real poverty and decay, much of the South exists on the memories of what it thought it once was, while completely lacking tangible success or the promise of a better tomorrow for the millions of residents spread across thousands of small towns in a part of America that's often overshadowed by big cities and resort towns. That isn't an insult to the many good people living in the outlying portions of the South, many of which are more than content with the freedom of isolation, a culture of riding around on back roads, or just sitting around the bonfire with family and friends. No, it's just the harsh economic reality of a part of America where livability is poor and regular folks have to work twice as hard just to get by. When you look at the states that make up the southern United States, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia, their combined 2022 GDP, or gross domestic product, was 40% less than just the single state of California. What's more,
But to be fair, you compare anything to California and it looks small. California has a bigger GDP than the country that I'm from. And the country that I'm from is a pretty well-off country. So that's when you really know how crazy it is. Like, compare anything to California and it's gonna look small.
Total population of those southern states is in excess of 50 million residents, nearly 30% higher than California's 38.94 million residents.
I do understand what he's saying. That's fair enough, but at the same time, a lot of the money in California is the big businesses. Like, they'll make up probably what, 80% of the GDP, maybe more, maybe less, but probably around that. I mean, maybe more than 80%, to be honest. And you always hear about the struggles of living in California as well. Don't get me wrong. Some people live very good in California, but at the same time, some people don't live very good there. Like places like LA and stuff like that. There's places that are just as bad, if not worse, than some parts of the southern states that it's mentioning. So, I mean, I do understand the GDP comparison, but from what I've seen, there's its own problems in California as well, to say the least. And again, the GDP is like vastly made up by the big companies, because there's some huge companies that come out from that state.
And that's, at least in part, because the principal industries there are agriculture, oil and gas, construction, and manufacturing.
Yeah.
And it isn't that those industries are completely void of any good-paying middle-class jobs, it's more about the overall lack of modern employment sectors there altogether. The Northeast is an important financial and business services core, with Wall Street, D.C., and every Ivy League university, while Western states serve as the epicenter for silicon and venture capital funding. And Texas, Florida, Colorado, and Utah have all become a primary target for major modern businesses looking to diversify or relocate. Even the Midwestern region has taken real advantage of its own shortcomings in recent years, utilizing its strong infrastructure and central location to bring in billions of dollars in logistics and warehousing investments. But the South remains stuck in this perpetual limbo, as the biggest cities there continue growing, while rural areas continue to erode away.
I mean, I guess that's a fair point, because you do see a lot of the cities in the south are prospering now. But I guess for the smaller towns and stuff, they're struggling just as much, if not more. I've not really looked into that before, so I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll see some of the comments. And also, again, if you're someone who's from the south, one of these states, please let me know your thoughts. The USA is very similar to Brazil. The Northeast is for us in terms of poverty what the South is for the USA, and the South of Brazil is known to be separatist, as well as the South of the USA. The South of Brazil also has racial tensions, and there is a lot of racism there. I mean, I know Italy, the South of Italy is a lot poorer than the North. Northern Italy is a lot more wealthy. So it seems to be a thing in a lot of countries. In the UK, I don't really think it's a thing. I might be wrong. Maybe the North, like right, no, I'm thinking of like certain cities like Blackpool, but I mean, I don't actually know if they are financially less or it's just how the city looks. I don't really think England's like that, which is, again, I could be wrong, but I don't think it is. It's not like this big thing about that. Obviously London's where most of the money comes from, but you got big cities like Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, all northern cities. I guess Newcastle's a lot higher up, and I mean, some cities will be worse than others, but there's not really like a divide like that. And there's probably divides in a lot of other countries as well. Again, the US, this person mentioned Brazil. Italy, I know for a fact it's quite well known that the North's a lot more wealthy than the South. And it's just fascinating how that ends up like that. But yeah, hopefully you found this interesting. Maybe you didn't think this was a good video or not, but yeah, it's just to see what's going on. And yeah, let me know your thoughts. But until next time, like, subscribe, peace.